Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Cinelli, president of the New England Cable and Telecommunications Association, and I'm very proud and honored to have David Porter with us today. David has served as executive director of the Walter Cates Foundation since 2006. He oversees the day-to-day management of the foundation, which is a leading advocate for diversity in the media and entertainment industries. He also manages the allocation of foundation funds in support of organizations and programs which champion industry-wide diversity initiatives. David, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for getting up this early and coming out to check us out. I think this is going to be a great discussion. One of the things that I really like about this industry, and probably the reason why I've stayed in the industry for so long, is that we are probably one of the few industries which are really, as an industry, committed to diversity. And so we focus on workforce diversity, supplier diversity, diversity in our programming content. We do it through a variety of different things, whether it's through the support of organizations like NAMIC and WICT, whether it's through conducting surveys to measure our output, holding a diversity week, which if any of you all happen to be free on the week of September 25th, come on down to New York and you can have a whole week talking about diversity. Today we're going to have a chance just to talk briefly with, and have a real conversation about diversity in our industry and talk about some of the best practices, some of the things that we can learn from each of our companies. Our panelists here are going to share their wisdom and insights, and I'm going to leave some time for some questions for anyone out there who has any specific things they want us to explore a little more deeply. I'm going to start over here at my left. Each participant is going to introduce themselves and then we'll jump right in.
Okay.
So?
Wisdom and insights. You set the bar high there. Good morning, everyone. I'm Prince Selhair. I'm the general manager for Comcast Sportsnet New England. We are the home of the Boston Celtics. I spent the first 20 years or so of my career in news and transitioned to sports about 10 years ago.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Cornish. I am the Region Vice President of Human Resources for Cox Communications, based here in Rhode Island. And I've been in the cable industry about 9.5 years. I'm responsible for traditional HR functions, also employee engagement, wellness, diversity, inclusion, and safety and risk.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Camilla Avant, and I am the president of the NAMIC New England chapter. NAMIC is the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity Communications, if you don't know. We're a national media trade organization that the Cates Foundation is a strong supporter of. And I'm also formerly in television. I was with Media General for about 9 years, where I negotiated retransmission consent agreements, which was really fun. And we all know about, if you know about those, yeah. and supported the television stations with carriage rights and other related station issues.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming out today. Well, let's just jump right in. When you all think about diversity and the challenges that the industry faces, what are some of the biggest challenges you think we need to be thinking about today?
I think we've made a lot of progress with diversity in our organizations. The piece where I think we have a long way to go really is the inclusion piece. It's promoting diversity, promoting diverse employees within organizations. People have a tendency to hire who they know. So just broadening our networks on the executive and management level and the recruiting level, broadening the network so you can get a more diverse pool of people, bring them into the organization and make the organization inviting so that you can retain those diverse candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I would say, along those lines, I would say there are two things. One is how we define diversity. Because, and then two, I would say promoting diverse individuals. I think if you took 10 people in any organization and you asked them what diversity means, they would probably answer you differently. And I think the notion of diversity and inclusion especially has evolved over the years. And I just think people are in different places. So I think if we could all get on the same page, I think we would have stronger momentum. And then the second thing is promoting diversity. And I think it's human nature to be comfortable with what you know. And that, and there's a term that we use in the diversity world, and I don't love the term because it sounds very negative, but it's called unconscious bias. But, and really, all that really means is people are comfortable with what they're familiar with, so it's sort of sameness. And unwittingly, we end up in a place where people end up promoting or hiring people they feel comfortable with because it's what they know. So, breaking through those two barriers, I think, are the biggest challenges.
Okay.
I agree with both of what the panelists said. And I think a lot of it is everybody wants, I think most companies are conscious that they want to be diverse. And there's steps that you can do to have more training, have people come in who maybe have the same thoughts and goals that you have, but how to really get a good diversity program in place is, I think, the challenge. Everybody has good intentions, and there's some companies that stand out as being very good at promoting diversity and set the standard, but it's hard to actually get that in place. And I think one of the main commitments is probably getting a diversity officer whose main job is to focus on, that's what they do all day, to focus on recruiting, retention, making the workplace comfortable where everybody feels like they can contribute and that they're comfortable and they're welcome there and they will stay. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Having good intentions and maybe having a yearly training program is great, but you have to do more. It's like making a cake. You need layers and layers and layers of things to do to make a good cake. So.
Okay, so you all have laid out to me, first it seems like we need to think about what's the role of diversity in organizations, and we've also talked about how we define diversity. So for our audience, what is the best way to define diversity for our companies, and then given that, why should we even care about diversity?
I'll take that first. So defining diversity. I think, so initially, diversity would probably mirror the EEOC or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission standards, right? Race, ethnicity, religion, kind of the standard definitions that people think of. But when we add inclusion to that mix, we're talking about diversity of thought. We're talking about being comfortable with ideas that might not be your ideas or ideas that are necessarily typical. It might be diversity of where someone grew up. You might have grown up in the Northeast and someone might have grown up in the Deep South, and you may just have a different kind of cultural upbringing. And that diversity is good. It might be where you went to school. So it's a much broader and looser kind of term. So I think, that's what, at Cox, that is what we're working toward, is getting everyone comfortable with what that means. And the second part of the question was, why is it important?
Right.
I think intuitively we all know that people, when they come to work and they feel valued and respected and like their contributions matter, it helps move the business forward. But research is also backing that up. McKinsey did a study a couple of years ago. It was a multinational study. They studied almost 400 companies, and they found that companies in the top quartile of diversity and inclusion were 35% more likely to have earnings above the industry median. So, data, statistics are showing that it's real.
I'm going to oversimplify it a little bit in just saying that, to me, diversity just means difference. It means, difference of thought, the race and ethnicity, whether you're married, unmarried, smoker, non-smoker, millennial, Gen Z, baby boom, whatever it is, to me, it just means different. And I come from the programming and production side of things, and if you have this number of people in the room and it's all the same people from the same backgrounds, you're going to get the same crap on the air. So you really want to have people in a room who represent different perspectives and can offer different contexts to things. And I think it gives you a much richer programming experience. And why is it important? I agree that it's just good for business.
Well, let me push this a little bit harder on that. Okay, so I get it. Diversity of thought seems to make a difference. Certainly diversity in the numbers has an impact on the bottom line. I can understand why it even makes a difference when we talk about programming and whatnot. But when I talk about the people who are climbing up and down the poles and wiring houses and whatnot, why does diversity matter there? I mean, some people make the argument that diversity should matter across the entire company. And it seems like that might be the case, but I'm not really convinced yet. So I want to know if someone can convince me.
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think diversity is important across the board. And I think just like for a company, you want to serve the community and you want that your employees to look like the community that you serve, or your customers. And in the same way as if you're, I would say, an employee that's of a certain ethnicity, you want to be in a company where also that's representative of different races. It's hard to be the only one all the time. And there's studies that show, I read something in the Harvard Business Review, that diverse employees, when they're surrounded by people that not only look like them, but from other nationalities and ethnic groups, seem to flourish in that environment where differences, again, as previously mentioned, differences of experiences bring different value. So for the guy maybe who's working on the, wiring a pole or installing cable, for him to see, well, okay, I might be, on the technical side, but on the business side or on the management side, there's also people that reflect the same ethnic diversity as and maybe he would like to get in management sometime. So I think we all need to see a reflection of diversity in all levels of management, because again, it's a I would say a benchmark for companies to show that people at any level, you can do well, you can be successful on any level.
I mean, I think that's great. So basically what you all said thus far is we need to think about it for idea generation, creativity. We need to think about it as far as our employees being able to have an environment where they can come and be themselves because their environment represents them. It's important for us when we think about it from our clientele and our customers that we're dealing with. So those are all the issues that it seems to make a difference. Okay, I'm starting to be convinced. I might believe. No, I mean, the reason why I ask these questions is that, for a long period of time in the U.S., diversity was really kind of a good thing to do. And that's nice, but that really then depends on the hearts of the people who are making the decisions. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it really is about the nature of our business, and especially our business, which touches people in every way. That it's important for us to be able to make those types of connections in an organic way, and having a diverse workforce does that. And just for the record, the country is diversifying more and more by the day. So regardless of whether we want to deal with diverse organizations or not, we have no choice because our employee base is going to be that. Right. Well, cool. Now, Princelle, you were talking a lot initially about promotion and the challenges of promoting folks who are diverse. And then we've heard a little bit about unconscious bias, which probably has some impact on that. Let's talk a little bit more about what are the specific things that we could probably do to help to facilitate diversity as we think about promotions in our organizations.
Well, I think that it goes back to, kind of what are the core objectives of your business. Did you raise revenue 10% this year? Check. Did you raise ratings 10% this year? Check. Did you find ways to produce your content more efficiently? Check. Did you take steps toward fostering a diverse and inclusive workforce. Well, I'll do that next year. You know, it has to be a part of, you know, kind of the core objectives of the organization, and there has to be accountability and rewards attached to it. If you have diverse individuals within your organization and you're not finding ways to promote them, then there have to be some sort of consequences against that hiring manager for not doing that. I think that in and of itself will go a long way to promoting more diverse candidates up through an organization. We have this tendency to fall back on, and we said this earlier, we have this tendency to fall back on, you know, what we know, who we're comfortable with, people who are like us. And if you somehow are able to incentivize hiring managers, executives, what have you, on their steps forward in diversity, I think that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I think Prince Hill was in my head. I would say, yeah, there are lots of things you can do. I'll just talk a little bit about Cox because, you know, I think we have a good strategy in place. I'm the kind of person who would like to flip a switch and just watch it all happen next year, and it doesn't. You know, it's a building blocks kind of thing. But we introduced employee resource groups a few years ago, and we have about 2,500 very active participants. And that is where, you know, strategically, that's where we draw people in. So from a cultural perspective, that's where they're going to kind of get a feel for differences. And what's great about those is they're informal, and you can be a frontline employee or you can report to the president of the company, and you're all in the same place participating. And then we move up to diversity councils. Mm-hmm. And we have our national council led by the president of our company, mm-hmm. who reports on his diversity progress to the board of directors of our parent company. And I think that accountability really matters. And then regional councils, and they really focus on business issues. And then training. Camelia talked about training because you need to hit it on multiple levels. And then, you know, then you get it into your community programs, so you're Connect to Compete, you know, bridging the digital divide. So it's multi-layers. This year we added a component to our incentive program. Mm-hmm. We added a diversity mentoring goal. I think many people would agree they wish they had a little more direction, but we definitely accomplished, let me say, making people uncomfortable. Because having to figure out how do I mentor someone who's different. So I think those are some ways, and we've also modified processes. So our recruiting process has been modified so that every slate of candidates at a director level or below has to include minority candidates. Every slate of candidates at a director level and above has to include female and minority because we're trying to get better at that. So I think that's how you do it.
No, I mean, I think that what you all both laid out it's interesting. I think our industry is starting to go through this transition. For a long time, diversity was a business goal which was not treated like a business goal. You know, can you imagine your boss telling you, okay, diversity, just become more diverse. Now, when you want revenue, you were right. People want 10% increase year over year, and your bonus is based upon that. You have specific metrics, which then motivate people. And so the companies that have developed real business processes and have real accountability and then have metrics to measure their success, those are the ones that make progress. And it's interesting that you mentioned Cox because I think they actually won the Diversity Champion Award a couple of years ago. I remember Pat being on stage sometime back in the day, just relatively recently. But again, it was recognition of all that stuff. And so I think part of it is helping companies to understand we have to treat diversity as the same type of business issue that we would any other business thing that was important strategically. But I could probably keep on going. I got plenty more questions to ask you all, but I want to see if there's any questions out there in the audience before I kind of keep running my mouth. Okay, just speak up.
You guys talked a lot about diversity, and I think for me, diversity is factual, right? You can pull reports. We talked about race, gender, marital status, and those types of things. So what I'd be really interested in is a conversation around how do you measure the success of inclusion? So we can measure diversity, I think, right? We talk about those items on an application, whether it be, like I said, race or marital status or birthplace, but how do you measure, and in your opinion, inclusion? Because I think that's a really big piece of that, because that's a feeling to me more, that or your employees feel included. So I'd be interested in that.
Any of you all want to take a stab?
Go ahead.
You know, that's you know, if diversity is the science, inclusion is the art, right? It is more of a feel of the organization. You know, I would go back to saying, like, you know, we talked about mentorship earlier. Mentorship is, you know, kind of how you interact with employees versus sponsorship, which is what you say about them when they're not in the room. And I think that, you know, when you're in a situation where you're considering someone to lead a project, and more times than not, a diverse candidate is, or a diverse employee is considered to lead projects, that's one way you can tell that, okay, the diversity is permeating throughout or inclusion, I should say, is permeating throughout the organization, because these people are getting opportunities that they otherwise would not have gotten.
And I would just add to that, it's about engagement. I think you see that in engagement. When you see people participate in employee resource groups or participate in diversity councils, I think that's kind of how you measure.
I think another way probably to measure inclusion, I'm sure you can see it clearly on the exit side, where the number of diverse candidates don't stay. So obviously, if they're leaving, you're not being inclusive, you're not engaging. So I think to flip that around, how do you measure inclusion in positive ways, like you said, from these affinity, and even do a survey, anonymous, automated survey to see a random sample size of how employees feel included. And then it's like a blind way to measure. And then that could be a way for you to say, okay, we're not being inclusive, here's our numbers. What policies, what things can we enact? If we don't have ERG groups or affinity groups, maybe we should start doing those. So maybe a way to start to see if you're being inclusive is just to do an initial survey on your employees. I think it's a good way to measure if you're looking for numbers as a measurement tool.
Yeah, and actually you raise you make a great comment, because it is very difficult to do. And I think what the best organizations do is they triangulate. What they do is they collect all these data points.
Right.
So you do the surveys, you look at retention rates, you look at participation in diverse activities and a variety of different things. And then when you see that all those things are giving you the same kind of signal, that gives you a sense that you have an inclusive environment. If you see that those things seem to be going different ways, like retention sucks for women or people of color, but there is involvement with ERGs, but there may or may not be a mixed results on satisfaction, that tells you you've got work to do. Other questions? There's the mic.
John Seddick with Comcast. I'd be curious what the resources are out there for companies or individuals, either like the Katz Foundation or consulting firms, and how you find that market to sort of bring some third-party thought into either to recommend hires or to sort of provide organizational guidance in this area.
I think it goes back to your network. We were having a conversation this morning before the panel about diversity training and the difficulty in finding consulting services, third-party services to come in and provide diversity and inclusion training. And David brought up, well, who have you been talking to? And I have a few people that do this for a living. It's really, kind of tapping into your own network to find those third-party companies that do a good job at this.
Yeah, I would also add, Cox every year participates in Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies survey. And we've been on that list 11 years in a row. I have to give that plug. And we were number 18 2 years in a row. But use those, we also use those other companies that are on that top 50 list. And companies are usually quite open to sharing best practices. And that would be a fairly economical way to gather information.
And so certainly, I think within the industry, you have organizations like CATES, you have NAMIC, you have WIC, which are all resources through their programs and through their expertise. I mean, one of the things that I think this is great about our industry is this is a place where we are not competitive at all. I mean, you can call up any of your quote-unquote competitors and ask them to share their diversity secrets, and we are always happy to do that because I think at the end of the day, when one company does better on diversity, it helps the industry, because as we all know, anyone who's been around the industry for a little while knows that we're all kind of rolling around these same companies around and around like circles, which is great. And so companies, I think, understand that and do what we can to work together in that regard. But certainly, if you want a place to start, you can give me a call, I'll give you a card, and I can certainly point you into a variety of different directions. There's a question up front. Here comes the mic. Yeah.
Good morning, Jay Alval with Cox Communications. You all have done an excellent job of describing how we as an industry are trending to a better state of business. Give me one tactical, each one of you. Let me rephrase that. What gets in the way or slows us on our direction that we're headed? One tactical item.
Want to take that, or I can take that?
You can take that first.
I think how we define diversity is the biggest obstacle. That is a tactical thing that if we could just get everyone on the same page, we could all move it forward much more quickly and seamlessly.
I would say just broadening your network, finding ways to reach out to people that don't look like you, aren't from the same background, and soliciting their opinions when you're looking to diversify your workforce. So just, I think that we are really good at networking with the people that we know. When it comes to, I have this executive producer opening, and I really want to find a diverse candidate for it. Chances are you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call your network, which is probably made up of a lot of people who look like you. What I'm saying is that we need to broaden our network and add in, not eliminate the people that you obviously know, but add more people to your mix, add more people to your network.
And I would take that a step further and saying when you are forming your panels for the people who you interview, when you're creating your succession planning lines and whatnot, you say, well, look, it's not done until I see high quality, diverse people in the mix to be considered. Because one of the things that I think happens in our industry a lot is we're very fast paced. And so as soon as we open up a position, we want it filled tomorrow. And that then facilitates this thing of, well, let me call up who I know real quickly. And someone says, well, here's this person who I think is great. Turns out that person may very well be great, and you put them in, and they look just like you because your network looks just like you. Instead, if you tell folks, well, look, what you've got to do is you can't even have that discussion until you create a diverse slate so you can force people to compare as opposed to just picking the first great person who comes along. What that then does is that says, okay, well, I've looked at who my network can generate, and those folks aren't that diverse. I had to call somebody else and say, hey, someone who's different from me, who's in your network? Another person who's different from me. Then I get 4 or 5 people. And then sometimes you surprise yourself. You say, wow, that first person who I would have hired is great, but here's another person who's great too, and they also are diverse. They're also diverse. So in addition to having all the skills, they're going to bring a different perspective, which is going to be valuable because it's going to make my company more creative, it's more effective, more efficient.
I think another roadblock probably would be commitment. I think, like I said, we all have good intentions, but if you're committed, you're tying diversity to an incentive plan, but you're also engaging those who are in senior leadership positions within your company, say your executive directors or your senior managers, to say, I want you to go out and sponsor someone. I want you to see an employee that maybe works in your department or in another cross-functional department, and who's highly performing employee, and say, I want you to mentor them. I want you to, everyone to maybe have a protege. I mean, really put things in place to engage those who are in the senior levels, who most likely are maybe not a minority, and to actually show what being in that role, you take on that person, you give them opportunities, you give them words of encouragement, you give them, you basically, you're mentoring them, you're grooming them, you're showing them the opportunities that could be something that maybe they could aspire to. So really committing to having sponsorship programs internally and mentorship programs internally. You don't always have to look outside towards NAMIC or WIC. You can start something internally. And I think that shows commitment and, you know, maybe could answer your question.
This is a question for Deborah. In your HR role, when you hire or when you're interviewing a diverse candidate, do you talk to them at all? Probably more likely after they're hired, about how important diversity is to your organization and how they can help champion diversity. And have you met anyone who's had resistance to that, who doesn't want to sort of champion for whatever background they've come from, and said, I hope that's not why you hired me, I'm just here to do the job? And how do you handle a situation like that?
Good question. Part of the orientation of all employees includes the culture, values, history of the company, and diversity and inclusion is a part of that. So it's not, we're not isolating one person and telling them that. It is an expectation and a value of the company. It is never going away. It's always been there. So they get that immediately coming in the door. They just know it's part of who we are.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, here's one. Great. Comes to mind.
My name is Greg. I work for Comcast, and I'm sitting here, you know, learning quite a bit about diversity. And one of the things that just kind of popped into my head here when you're talking about trying to build a diverse workforce, and you look at it on the team level, and you're building a team, you want a diverse team of a small number of people. And I think about it from the perspective of someone who's, you know, people competing for a spot on a team, trying to improve their career. So as a person looking to improve their career, and knowing that the hiring managers are looking to build a diverse team, and knowing that some of the prominent attributes of diversity are innate, you know, like I am who I am. I'm a, you know, middle-aged Caucasian. But what can a person do to affect their diversity, or to improve themselves in a way that makes them more diverse for a person who's hiring and building a diverse team?
That's a great question. Well, I'm going to let HR take that.
So, you know, it comes back, I think, to the company values, because if an inclusive environment is not part of the fabric of a company, and I'm not saying it's not part of the fabric of Comcast, you could do anything you wanted and it probably wouldn't matter, right? But if it is part of an inclusive environment, and a company knows it's more than just what color is my skin or what is my ethnic background, then I would just say, like Bill Belichick, do your job to the best of your ability.
And let me add something to that, because I mean, people talk about the power of diversity in organizations, and diversity gives you, makes organizations better and more effective because of the fact it gives you diversity of perspective. You get different opinions and whatnot. But there's an interesting research phenomenon that we see. If you are in a team where the diversity is managed well, you've got good team dynamics, so that the diversity that you see, the ideas that are generated, everyone gets heard and whatnot, that's what leads you to a successful team or a successful organization. Diversity which is managed poorly, where you have poor team dynamics, that actually causes your team to underperform. One of the things that you could do if you want to be effective in a diverse world is develop your ability to be able to help your team be more effective in hearing diversity of perspectives. So if I was a white male and I'm trying to show my value on my team, one of the things I would do is demonstrate that I have the ability when my team is discussing difficult issues to help to navigate that path, making sure that the woman who's in the group gets heard and doesn't get spoken over by one of my colleagues, making sure that the person of color may be saying an idea which on its surface doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense, but there's actually a grain of truth in there that would say, hey, that got missed, but let me help pull that out. Because that's an important diversity characteristic.
True.
Most people don't have that ability.
Right.
But the thing that's interesting about that, that's ability you can develop. And everyone can develop it. So I would also add to that, and here's a quiet secret, white guys are diverse too. No, they just are. I mean, because diversity is not just about race, gender, sexual orientation. It's what school you went to. It's where you grew up. I'm a simple guy from the Midwest, and so that affects my worldview in ways as fundamental as my race and my gender do. And so part of it is, making sure that also comes to the table.
Yeah. So in addition to what David said, yes, being a role model is a great, great way. Just show how it's done. Be a leader. You're going to be a leader in that area. And stretch assignments. Do what you can to get stretch assignments. Show that you're a person who not only does your job really well, but you are interested in other things that may not even be part of your job. You may be a programmer, but you're interested in a project on some financial topic. So I think modeling all those diverse behaviors is a way to show your flexibility and your ability to succeed in different environments, as well as take the organization forward.
I have time for one more question from the audience. There is one before we start trying to wrap this up. Well, not that I have one last question that I want you all, because right now the industry is going through the process where we do on a biannual basis where we survey all of our companies around our workforce practices and our diversity. And there's 3 areas that have always been particularly challenging for us as far as diversifying. Those are ad sales, the technology space, and sports. I've got some HR people, I got some sports people. Any ideas about what we might be able to do to try to work to diversify those areas? And I'm interested in all 3 of them. Ad sales is actually very interesting because they also make lots of money.
Right.
Any thoughts on how we tackle the kind of harder places for diversifying our workforce?
I think we have to start earlier. I don't think that diverse candidates or even earlier than that, diverse kids in high school or college, necessarily gravitate towards ad sales as a potential career path. When I was in college a long time ago, what I saw as far as, diversity were the people on air. So, coming out of college, I put together a tape and, sent it around to various markets trying to get a job on camera. And it wasn't until I learned about producing that I became interested in the management side. It's like producing, I can control the entire broadcast, not just 2 minutes. And I must have sent out 30 or 40 tapes around, and I got maybe 3 responses, basically thanks but no thanks. I sent out 5 resumes for producer jobs, and I got 5 offers. So that to me opened my eyes to, you know, a different career path. I can be behind the scenes. I can be in management. So I think to the extent that we can get younger folks interested in ad sales and have them realize that that is a career path for them, I think that would go a long way to helping the diversity in those areas.
You all have it?
I think be a little bit more creative. There's a lot of in communities that have programs that target maybe high school graduates who are maybe not sure where they want to go. There's Girls Who Code. There's a lot of different, I would say, specialized programs. So you want to do the normal recruiting, but sometimes it's easier to take a step out and say, well, what's going on in the community around me? Reaching out to maybe a lot of the colleges, and I'm thinking local here in the New England area, and Massachusetts, MIT, Harvard. They have a lot of special programs that they do within the communities they want to bring the next millennium, the next generation into the technology because they know that's where the jobs are. So not only recruiting college graduates and going to all the schools and doing production internships, which is also a good way to bring in talent into those areas. But I think if you look into certain areas in the community, there are private programs or community-based programs that are really trying to develop young adults to take them into the technology age because those are the ones who are using technology anyway. There's Build Boston is one that I can think of off the top of my head. Again, Girls Who Code. A lot of special programs are moving towards that technology, so that's something that I think it's a good resource to check out.
Okay.
You know, on the ad sales, I'll speak to that. I think start early, bring people in from other parts of the organization, which is, we have the luxury of doing that because we're all in one region, and then apply the other principles that we talked about, you know, mentoring, sponsoring, training, and make a concerted effort to identify skill and capacity and nurture that.
Well, I know it's about time for us to wrap up, so I want to give each of our panelists a chance to give any last final comments. Since we began at this end, I think we should start at that end.
I think for the opportunity to be here and to talk to everybody about diversity and inclusion. I think what I would like to wrap up to say is invest in programs that if you don't have a plan that's working or you feel like you need some help, reach out to WICT, reach out to CAT, reach out to NAMIC. They work with a lot of the larger broadcasters, and they have programs already set in place. They have, NAMIC has the ELDP, which is the Executive Leadership Development Program that takes highly performing employees and puts them through a training through the Darden School. And researchers show those employees that complete those programs and that investment that's made in those programs, they stay and they get promoted. They also have a leadership development program. WIC also has Betsy Magnets. So take advantage of those programs because those are ways to help employers and small companies start your diversity plan if you don't have one. So seek them out.
I guess 2 things. One, it is a whole lot more effective when it starts at the top, and it's a value at the very top of the organization because everyone carries that torch. And then the other thing I would say is people who are advocates of diversity and inclusion, or D&I is for short, are very passionate, and they are willing to talk with you. So if your HR person in your company is probably someone who would love for you to, you know, question and talk about, and just talk to people. You'll learn every time.
You know, diversity and inclusion in organizations is not easy. It's not easy to do, and it's not easy to talk about. We don't even, you know, talk about it as much as I think we need to. We don't talk about it as much as we talk about ratings or revenue or other core competencies. It really requires, I think, three things: patience. We really, we are a fast-paced industry, as David alluded to earlier, and we tend to just, want to fill positions right away. Pump the brakes, take your time, get a diverse slate of candidates before making hiring decisions. I think it takes courage. This is not something that happens organically. This is something that you really have to push and drive through the organizations. And I think it takes creativity. I think you have to look at candidates from all facets and really look at what are transferable skills, because the obvious skill set might not be there, but they may have skill sets that would apply to this particular job. So patience, courage, and creativity.
First, I'd like to thank our panelists. You all did a great job. So let's give them a round of applause. I just had a quick final comment. I want to thank you all for coming out and spending your time this morning. I know it's bright and early talking about diversity. I think we started out with the fact that this is a challenging issue, but the fact of the matter is it's a challenge that we as an industry will have to face because our workforce is changing whether we want it to or not. And the companies that are able to deal effectively with diversity, to bring in those employees, to actually include them, help them to get promoted all the way throughout the ranks, are the ones that are going to be more successful. And we're an industry which is changing very quickly. The companies that are today are very different than the companies that were 5 years ago. And they will be different from the ones 5 years from now. And so diversity may be the key to solving that. So I'm glad that you all are out here trying to help us figure it out. So thank you.
David, thank you very much. Thank you for putting together the panel, and I want to thank the panelists. I thought the panel was not only insightful, but very practical. So thank you again, and I think we'll definitely have this in the agenda for next year. Thanks. Oh, and one last thing. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will be here in this room at 9 o'clock to give the view from Washington. So don't wander off too far.